Austin with Spanish Sports and Spice. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're going to do a basic Spanish lesson on irregular verbs and two verb ideas. So let's get right into it. Irregular verbs and two verb ideas. Irregular verbs to start. So let's go ahead and put a very important verb up, querer. Querer. It means to want. This verb is used all the time, so you really want to memorize it and get really used to this verb here. Querer. Querer. It means to want. And I'm going to go ahead and just put the conjugations up. It's irregular. Quiero, quieres, quiere, queremos, quieren. If you notice, I didn't write yo quiero, tú quieres, él quiere, ella quiere, nosotros queremos, ellos quieren. I left off the subject pronouns. In Spanish, you have that option with all the verbs. You have that option. It's not as important to put the subject pronoun. It's really not something to worry too much about. In English, you have to always put it the I, you, he, she, we, they. In Spanish, the verb conjugations are so distinct, the endings, that if you just say quiero, you see the O, quieres, you see the ES, you know who you're talking about as far as the subject. So it's not strictly necessary to put it, not something you really have to worry about. So what do we notice here with this verb? Well, it's an ER verb, so you have all your normal endings, but something else is going on here. If you look at the E under querer, that E is changing, if you look at the conjugations here, to an IE, an IE, IE. And then for the EOS conjugation, an IE. Notice that nosotros didn't get the change. So this is called an E to IE stem change verb. Some of these verbs have changes in the stem or in the middle of the verb. An E to IE stem change verb. You have E to I stem change verbs. You have O to UE, U to UE. Really wouldn't recommend trying to get too bogged down with memorizing which verbs in E to I, O to UE, U to UE, but a lot of these verbs that are irregular are so common, we kind of use them all the time. So you just kind of get used to the irregularities by naturally using these verbs so often. Something to keep in mind, if you look at queremos, it didn't get the stem change, queremos. So nosotros, the nosotros conjugation, nosotros is never going to get the stem change. That is something to remember. Let's go ahead and put up another one. Poder, it means to be able or can. It's an O to UE stem change verb. So that O is going to change to a UE. Puedo. Puedes. Puede. Podemos. Nosotros doesn't get the stem change, so the O doesn't change to a UE, just stays to an O. And then pueden. And let's go ahead and put another one up. Let's do tener. It means to have. And just really irregular, this one. Tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tienen. So we see this is an E to IE stem change verb as well, just like querer. Nosotros doesn't get that stem change, but if you notice, this one's just extra weird. The yo conjugation here is extra strange because it doesn't get the E to IE change. It stays an E, but then it gets a random G. So you're going to see there's a series of verbs. I call them go verbs. where for just the yo conjugation, it gets a random G right there before the O. So it looks like go at the end. So that's why I call them go verbs. So there's a lot of irregularities, a lot of different things that can be hard to get used to, but it's not something to get bogged down with and try to memorize every single word and what group irregularity group does it fall into. We're going to use a lot of these words so much, these irregular ones. Some of them are so common that you kind of just start to memorize it, but you do want to be familiar in general with the idea of a stem change verb. There's some letter in the middle that's changing to something else. Nosotros doesn't get the change, and then the normal endings still occur at the end of the verb. Generally, the normal endings are going to be exactly the same. So this is pretty important to set up the to verb idea. So let's go ahead and do that, our to verb idea. And we will go ahead and try to say something like, I want to eat. I want to eat. So I'm going to ask, if you want, go ahead and pause the video and just take a shot and see, do you say this in Spanish? I want to eat. Do you remember how to say to eat, or do you know how to say to eat? To eat is the basic form of a verb in English with the to in front of it. Do you know how to say to eat? Can you put it together with I want to eat? Pause the video and let's see if you can come up with an answer. Well, how did you do? If you weren't able to do it, don't worry about it. I want to eat is quiero comer. And so we're getting into our rule regarding to verb ideas because now we have two verbs. That's what we're talking about here. I want is a verb, and to eat is a verb. So now there's two verbs. Usually they're one right after the other. They depend on each other. They work together as a team. And the rule is when you have a two verb idea, first verb conjugated, second verb infinitive. First verb conjugated, second verb infinitive. Conjugated, that means that you get rid of the AR, ER, or IR at the end of the base form of the verb and you replace it with the pattern that we're talking about. For these irregular verbs, you're going to have to also do the stem change if it has a stem change. And then second verb infinitive. Infinitive means you just leave the verb in its base form. It's a verb in its base form. In Spanish, it's going to end in AR, ER, or IR. And in English, it generally has that word to in front of it. So the second verb, you just leave it, ending in AR, ER, or IR. First verb conjugated, second verb infinitive. That being said, can you go ahead and do the following sentence? Let's go ahead and do, they want to cook. Go ahead and pause the video and let's see if you can translate that sentence, they want to cook. Well, how did you do? They want to cook. You're going to conjugate the first verb. They want, quieren. And then to cook, just leave it in the infinitive, cocinar. So you don't need a word for to here, to cook. The to is built in to the meaning of the infinitive in English. Cocinar means to cook, so it's just quieren cocinar. Let me go ahead and put some other ones up here for you that are used with the two verb ideas usually. So we have necesitar, means to need. We have esperar, to hope. And we will go ahead and put over here should, or deber, which means should. Necesitar, esperar, and deber are regular verbs as far as conjugation, or there's no stem change. There's no stem change in the middle of the verb, so it's just conjugated like you normally would, an AR verb, an ER verb. So, can you go ahead and do he should cook? How about that? Can you do that? Let's do two sentences. He should cook and he needs to cook. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do those two sentences in Spanish. He should cook and he needs to cook. How did you do for he should cook? Debe cocinar. So this one is a little bit different, or could be a little bit different, because in English, we say he should cook, I should cook. We don't use the to. We don't say I should to cook, he should to cook. This is one of those instances in English where English is a little weird, a little inconsistent, I guess, and doesn't have its to, but don't let that affect anything to do with Spanish. In Spanish, they're both verbs. You have should and to cook or cook, and you just have to follow the rule. Two verb idea, first verb conjugated, second verb infinitive. It's exactly the same. Debe, you conjugate that, and then cocinar. How about he needs to cook? Necesita cocinar. Necesita cocinar. Let's go ahead and do we can learn. Let's go ahead and do we can learn. So go ahead and pause the video and let's see if you can do one. We can learn. How did you do? We can learn. Podemos aprender. Once again, two verb idea, even though in English we don't have the to, we don't say we can to learn. Spanish, it's the same. We conjugate the first verb, second verb infinitive. Podemos. It's a stem change verb, but nosotros doesn't get the stem change, so it's just the O there, PO. You conjugate that first verb, podemos, and then to learn, aprender. And finally, I'm going to show you how to do, let's do, we have to speak. How about that? We have to speak. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do that one? We have to speak. Well, maybe you did something, tenemos hablar. And based on what you've heard so far, that's good. First verb conjugated, second verb infinitive. There's just an extra rule that we have to learn that for now is only going to apply to tener, when tener is the first verb of a two verb idea. So let me go ahead and show you that rule. When tener or one of its conjugations is the first verb of a two verb idea, you must put a K, Q-U-E, in between the two verbs. So we have to speak really should be tenemos que hablar. Tenemos que hablar. Only happens with tener. It doesn't happen with any other, for now, for a new learner, this is the verb that it's going to happen with, and with all the other verbs, you're going to think of it as it doesn't happen with them, just with tener. And only when tener is the first verb of a two verb idea, when it's followed by a verb. For instance, if you say something like tenemos dinero, we have money, there's no que in between because dinero is not a verb. But if you have to say something like tenemos que ganar dinero, we have to earn money or we have to make money, well, then you have to put the que there because ganar is a verb and a conjugation of tener is being followed by a verb. Well, there you have the video on irregular verbs and two verb ideas. I hope you enjoyed it. Keep in mind that language is a bridge between life and spice.